The homeless boy's bare feet left bloody prints on the hospital floor as he ran toward the dying girl's room. Security was coming. He had 60 seconds, maybe less. His hands trembled as he reached for her cold fingers one last time. "Please wake up," he whispered. "I know you're still in there." Emily's eyes suddenly opened, green and terrified, and she grabbed his wrist with impossible strength. Then the alarm started screaming. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video, share and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere? We want to know. The city never sleeps, but on this particular night, it felt like death itself had wrapped its icy fingers around every corner. The wind howled through the dark alleys, carrying with it the smell of rain and desperation. Milo pressed his small body against the cold brick wall, his thin jacket doing nothing to protect him from the freezing temperature. His bare feet were numb, covered in dirt and small cuts that had stopped bleeding hours ago. He was only 12 years old, but the streets had aged him in ways that made him look both younger and older at the same time. His stomach twisted with hunger. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The other homeless people in his usual sleeping spot had chased him away earlier that evening, claiming he was bad luck. So now, Milo wandered alone through the wealthy district of the city, where the buildings were tall and made of glass, where people walked past him without seeing him as if he were invisible. He turned a corner and saw it. A massive building with white walls and bright lights pouring out of every window. The words, Carson Memorial Hospital, were written in gold letters above the entrance. Milo had passed this place before, but he'd never dared go inside. Tonight was different. Tonight he was so cold he could barely feel his fingers. He watched as a delivery truck pulled up to the back entrance. A man in a uniform jumped out, propped the door open with a box, and disappeared inside to grab more supplies. This was Milo's chance. He moved quickly, silently, like a shadow. His small size helped him slip through the door just as the delivery man returned. Milo ducked behind a stack of boxes and held his breath. The warmth hit him immediately. It was like stepping into heaven. The heat made his frozen skin burn, but it was the most beautiful pain he'd ever felt. The delivery man finished his work and left, letting the door slam shut behind him. Milo was alone now, inside the hospital, surrounded by the hum of machines and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals. He crept down a long hallway, looking for a quiet corner where he could rest without being found. The floors were so shiny he could see his reflection, a dirty, broken version of himself staring back. He passed several doors, all of them closed. Then he heard voices approaching. Footsteps. Panic shot through his chest. Milo tried the nearest door handle. It turned. He slipped inside and quietly closed the door behind him, pressing his back against it, breathing hard. Then he turned around. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of several machines. They beeped softly, rhythmically, like a strange kind of music. And in the center of it all was a bed. On that bed lay a girl. She looked about his age, maybe a year or two older. Her skin was pale, almost white, and her lips had a slight blue tint to them. Tubes ran from her mouth, her arms, her chest. Wires connected her to the machines that surrounded her like mechanical guards. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. Milo stepped closer, his heart pounding. He'd seen dead people before on the streets, but this girl didn't look dead. She looked like she was waiting. Like she was stuck somewhere between this world and another. A machine beside her bed pushed air into her lungs with a harsh, rhythmic sound. Her chest rose and fell, but it didn't look natural. It looked forced. Milo didn't know why he did what he did next. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper that he couldn't explain. He reached out and gently touched her hand. It was cold, but not as cold as his own. And then, something impossible happened. The girl's eyes opened. Just for 2 seconds. Maybe less. But Milo saw it. Her eyes were green, the color of leaves in spring, and they looked directly at him with an expression that made his blood freeze. She was awake. She was aware. She was trapped. Then her eyes closed again and she was still. Milo stumbled backward, his breath coming in short gasps. "No, no, no," he whispered. "Wake up. Please wake up." He touched her hand again, squeezing it gently. Nothing happened. But then he noticed something. He leaned closer, watching her chest carefully. The machine pushed air into her lungs and her chest rose. But just before the machine pushed again, he saw her chest move slightly on its own. It was tiny, barely noticeable, but it was there. She was trying to breathe. The machine was breathing for her, but she was trying to breathe by herself. "You're fighting," Milo whispered, his eyes wide with understanding. "You're fighting it." Suddenly the door burst open. Bright light flooded the room. A nurse in blue scrubs stood in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. For a moment she just stared at Milo, this dirty, barefoot boy standing beside the most important patient in the entire hospital. Then she screamed, "Security! There's someone in the ICU." Milo's heart exploded with terror. He backed away from the bed, his hands raised. "No, wait, I didn't." Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Two large men in black uniforms appeared, their faces hard and angry. They grabbed Milo by his arms, lifting him off the ground. "Please?" Milo shouted, struggling against their grip. "Please, you have to listen to me. Get this kid out of here," the nurse yelled, checking all the machines frantically, making sure nothing had been disturbed. They dragged Milo toward the door. His feet kicked uselessly in the air. But as they pulled him into the hallway, he twisted his head back toward the girl on the bed, and he shouted the only thing that mattered. "Switch off the ventilator. She'll breathe on her own." The security guards froze. The nurse froze. Everyone in the hallway turned to stare at this filthy homeless child who had just said the most insane thing they'd ever heard. "What did you say?" the nurse whispered, her face pale. "The machine." Milo shouted again, his voice cracking with desperation. "It's drowning her. Turn it off and she'll breathe. I saw her trying. I saw her eyes open. She's awake in there." "You're crazy," one of the security guards growled, tightening his grip on Milo's arm until it hurt. But then, behind them, inside the room they just left, something happened. The machine started beeping. Not the normal, steady beeps. These were fast, urgent, screaming beeps. The nurse rushed back inside. Her vitals are spiking. Heart rate increasing. Brain activity. She stopped, staring at the monitor in disbelief. "This isn't possible." The security guards dragged Milo further down the hall, but he kept screaming. "She opened her eyes. She's trying to wake up. Please, you have to believe me." They threw him into a small, cold room and slammed the door. Milo pounded on it with his small fists, but it was useless. He sank to the floor, tears streaming down his dirty face. In another part of the hospital, an alarm was ringing on someone's phone. A message flashed across the screen, "Patient E. Carson, irregular activity. Immediate attention required." The man holding the phone stood up so fast his chair fell over. His face, normally calm and controlled, twisted with something between hope and terror. Jonathan Carson, the most powerful CEO in the entire city, the man who owned half the buildings downtown, the man who could destroy lives with a single phone call, grabbed his coat and ran. His daughter was showing signs of life. For the first time in 6 months. And somewhere in the basement of his hospital, locked in a storage room, a homeless boy sat in the dark and whispered to himself, "She's still in there. I know she is." The machines in Emily Carson's room continued their urgent beeping. And deep inside her mind, trapped in a prison of medication and mechanical breathing, Emily Carson heard a voice for the first time in what felt like forever. A boy's voice. Young, scared, but certain. "Wake up," it had said. "You're fighting. Keep fighting." And for the first time since the accident, Emily wanted to. Jonathan Carson's car screeched to a stop outside the hospital entrance. He didn't wait for his driver to open the door. He threw it open himself and ran, his expensive shoes pounding against the pavement. People jumped out of his way. They always did. Jonathan Carson was not a man you wanted to anger. He was 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a boxer and eyes that could cut through steel. His black suit was perfectly pressed, his gray hair slicked back, his jaw set in a permanent expression of control. But right now, control was slipping through his fingers like sand. He burst through the hospital doors and immediately the head doctor rushed toward him. Dr. Stevens was a thin man with glasses and worry lines etched deep into his forehead. "Mr. Carson, please let me explain." "Where is she?" Jonathan's voice was low and dangerous. "What happened to my daughter?" "She's stable now, but there was an incident. A homeless child somehow got into her room and—" Jonathan's hand shot out and grabbed the doctor by his coat. What?" Dr. Stevens' face went pale. "Security has him contained. He didn't harm her, I promise, but—" "Take me to him. Now." The doctor nodded quickly and led Jonathan through the hospital corridors. Nurses and staff pressed themselves against the walls as they passed. Everyone knew who Jonathan Carson was. Everyone knew what he was capable of when someone threatened what was his. And Emily was all he had left. 6 months ago there had been an accident. A car crash on a rainy night. His wife had died instantly. Emily had survived, but she'd never woken up. The doctors said her brain was swelling, that she needed time, that the ventilator was keeping her alive until her body could heal. 6 months of waiting. 6 months of watching his daughter lie motionless in that bed. 6 months of hoping, praying, begging for any sign that she was still in there. And now some filthy street child had broken into her room and touched her? Jonathan's hands curled into fists. They reached the storage room. A security guard unlocked the door and stepped aside. Jonathan walked in and the door closed behind him with a heavy click. Milo was sitting in the corner, his knees pulled up to his chest, shivering. When he saw the man who entered, his eyes went wide with fear. This wasn't just any man. This was power. This was danger. This was the kind of person who could make Milo disappear forever with a snap of his fingers. Jonathan stared down at the boy. His jaw tightened. You broke into my hospital. You entered my daughter's room. Give me one reason why I shouldn't have you arrested right now. Milo's voice came out as a whisper. I just wanted to be warm. You put your filthy hands on my daughter. I didn't hurt her. I would never. Then why did you touch her? Jonathan's voice exploded through the small room like thunder. Milo flinched, tears forming in his eyes. Because I saw her eyes open. Jonathan froze. His entire body went rigid. What? She opened her eyes, Milo repeated, his voice trembling. Just for a second. When I touched her hand, she looked at me. She was awake. Jonathan's hands started shaking. You're lying. I'm not lying. I saw it. And I saw something else too. Milo stood up slowly, his small frame barely reaching Jonathan's chest. Your daughter isn't dying, Mr. Carson. She's fighting. The doctors say. The doctors are wrong. Milo's voice cracked with emotion. The machine is breathing for her, but she's trying to breathe on her own. I watched her chest move before the machine pushed air in. She's trying to wake up, but the machine won't let her. Jonathan's mind raced. This was insane. This was a homeless child with no education, no medical training, claiming to know more than an entire team of specialists. But something in the boy's eyes made him pause. There was no lie there. Only certainty. The ventilator is what's keeping her alive, Jonathan said slowly, trying to control his voice. If we turn it off, she'll die. No, Milo said firmly. If you keep it on, she'll never wake up. The machine is drowning her. I've seen it before. Where? Where have you seen it before? Milo looked down at his bare feet. On the streets. People overdose all the time. Or they get too cold and pass out. I watch them breathe. I watch them fight. I know the difference between someone who's dying and someone who's fighting to stay alive. Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest. This child, this nobody, had been watching people die while the world ignored him. And now he was standing here, telling a billionaire CEO that he understood something doctors couldn't see. Why should I believe you? Jonathan's voice was softer now, but still sharp. Why should I trust a street rat who broke into my hospital? Milo looked up, and his eyes were blazing with something fierce and desperate. Because your daughter grabbed my hand back. The room went silent. What? Jonathan whispered. When I touched her hand, she grabbed mine. Just a little. Just her fingers. But she did it. She knows someone is there. She's trying to come back. But every time the machine forces air into her lungs, it pushes her back down. She's fighting the machine, Mr. Carson. And she's losing. Jonathan's legs felt weak. He stumbled backward and leaned against the wall. His mind was spinning. Could this be true? Could his daughter really be trapped inside her own body, fighting a machine that was supposed to be saving her? The doctor said. The doctors don't sit with her, Milo interrupted. They check machines. They read numbers. But they don't watch her. Not like I did. Not close enough to see the small things. Jonathan covered his face with his hands. For the first time in 10 years he felt tears burning behind his eyes. If you're wrong, if I turn off that ventilator and she dies, I'll have killed my own daughter. And if you don't, Milo said quietly, she'll stay trapped forever. Half alive. Never free. The door suddenly burst open. Dr. Stevens rushed in, his face flushed. Mr. Carson, you need to see this. Jonathan straightened up immediately. What happened? Emily's brain activity is spiking again. We've never seen readings like this. It's as if she's becoming more aware. Jonathan's heart stopped. He looked at Milo, who simply nodded. It started when I touched her, the boy said. And it's still happening because she knows now. She knows someone believes she's still in there. Jonathan made a decision in that moment that would change everything. He grabbed Milo by the shoulder, not roughly but firmly. You're coming with me. If you're right, I need you to show me. If you're wrong. He didn't finish the sentence. They walked quickly through the hospital, Dr. Stevens hurrying behind them, trying to protest. Mr. Carson, this is highly irregular. We can't let a civilian child interfere with... He's with me, Jonathan snapped. That's all you need to know. They reached Emily's room. Through the glass window, Jonathan could see his daughter lying on the bed, surrounded by machines. She looked so small, so fragile, so far away. He turned to Milo. Show me. Milo walked into the room slowly, respectfully. The nurses inside looked shocked, but one glare from Jonathan kept them silent. The boy approached the bed and stood beside Emily. He looked down at her with an expression that was far too old for his young face. An expression of someone who understood suffering. Watch her chest, Milo said softly. Right before the machine breathes for her. Watch close. Everyone in the room leaned forward. The ventilator hissed and pushed air into Emily's lungs. Her chest rose, then fell. Then the machine prepared for another breath. And in that tiny moment of silence, Jonathan saw it. A small movement, barely visible. Emily's chest tried to rise on its own. Dear God, Dr. Stevens whispered. She's attempting spontaneous respiration. In English, Jonathan growled. She's trying to breathe, the doctor translated, his voice shaking. Milo placed his hand gently on Emily's hand. You're still fighting, aren't you? He whispered. You're so strong. And then Emily's fingers moved. Not much. Just a twitch. But everyone in the room saw it. Jonathan's knees almost gave out. He grabbed the bed rail to steady himself. Emily? Baby, if you can hear me? Her fingers moved again, this time more clearly. Like she was trying to reach for something. For someone. The machine started beeping faster. Her heart rate increased. Her brain activity spiked higher than it had been in months. She's responding to external stimuli, Dr. Stevens said in amazement. This is extraordinary. But then the ventilator pushed air into her lungs again, and Emily's body seemed to fight it. Her chest jerked slightly. The movement looked wrong, like she was trying to cough but couldn't. She's fighting the ventilator, Milo said urgently. Do you see it now? Every time it breathes for her, it interrupts what she's trying to do. Dr. Stevens shook his head firmly. Mr. Carson, I understand this looks promising, but we cannot turn off life support based on the observations of a child. If we remove the ventilator and she cannot sustain her own breathing, she will suffer brain damage within minutes. She could die. But what if he's right? Jonathan's voice was raw with emotion. What if we're the ones keeping her trapped? Then we do proper tests, the doctor insisted. We wean her off slowly over days, maybe weeks. We monitor every second. But we do not just switch off the machine. Milo turned to Jonathan, his eyes pleading. You're her father. Deep down, you know if she's still in there or not. You know. Jonathan looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. And he thought back to 6 months ago when the doctors had first put her on the ventilator. They'd said it was temporary. They'd said she would heal. But she hadn't. She just stayed. Frozen. Suspended. Neither alive nor dead. He remembered how Emily used to laugh. How she would run through their house, singing badly and not caring who heard. How she would argue with him about everything, so stubborn, so fierce, so full of life. That girl wouldn't give up. That girl would fight. I need proof, Jonathan said finally. I need to know for certain before I make this decision. Then let me stay with her, Milo said. Let me stay and I'll show you. I'll show you all the signs the machines can't measure. Dr. Stevens started to object, but Jonathan held up his hand. The boy stays. He doesn't touch any equipment. He just observes. And we observe him observing. Agreed. The doctor hesitated, then nodded slowly. For 1 hour. That's all. 1 hour, Jonathan agreed. He pulled up a chair next to Milo and together they sat beside Emily's bed. The CEO and the homeless boy. The man with everything and the child with nothing. United by one desperate hope. That Emily Carson was still fighting to come home. Outside the room, through the glass window, a figure watched them from the shadows of the hallway. A man in an expensive suit with cold eyes and a careful smile. David Carson, Jonathan's brother, stood perfectly still as he observed the scene. He watched the homeless boy. He watched his brother's desperate face. He watched Emily's fingers twitch. And slowly David's smile faded. This was not supposed to happen. Emily was supposed to stay asleep. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. We have a problem. The boy saw something. Activate contingency plan. He hit send and walked away, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. Inside the room, Milo suddenly looked up as if he'd felt something wrong. He glanced toward the window but saw nothing. Still, a chill ran down his spine. "Mr. Carson," he whispered. "I think someone doesn't want your daughter to wake up." Jonathan's head snapped toward him. "What makes you say that?" "I don't know," Milo admitted. I have a bad feeling. Like we're being watched." Jonathan's jaw tightened. His mind immediately went to the one person who would benefit from Emily never waking up. His brother. His business partner. The man who would inherit everything if Emily died. "Stay close to her," Jonathan ordered Milo. "Don't leave this room. I need to make some calls." He stood and walked toward the door, his mind already calculating, planning, preparing for a war he'd hoped would never come. Behind him, Milo held Emily's hand and whispered, "Don't worry. I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." And somewhere deep in her mind, Emily heard him. She heard him and she fought harder. The hour passed like a lifetime. Milo sat perfectly still beside Emily's bed, his eyes never leaving her face. He watched every flutter of her eyelids, every tiny movement of her fingers, every shallow attempt her body made to breathe on its own. Jonathan paced near the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and tense as he made call after call. Security. Lawyers. Private investigators. He was building walls around his daughter, but walls couldn't protect her from what was already inside. Dr. Stevens and 2 nurses monitored the machines, recording every spike in brain activity, every irregular heartbeat, every abnormal reading. The numbers told a story that medical science couldn't fully explain. Emily Carson was waking up. Slowly. Painfully. But unmistakably. "Tell me what you see," Jonathan said suddenly, ending his phone call and turning to Milo. "Tell me everything." Milo didn't look away from Emily. His voice was soft, almost dreamlike as he spoke. "When I lived on the streets, I learned to watch people. Really watch them. Because knowing if someone was about to die or about to wake up could mean the difference between getting help or getting robbed." Jonathan sat down across from him, leaning forward. "Go on." "There was this old man named Charlie. He used to sleep near the subway station. One winter night he collapsed. Everyone thought he was dead. But I watched his neck, right here." Milo touched the side of his own throat. "I saw his pulse. Faint but there. And I saw his eyes moving under his eyelids, like he was dreaming. So I knew he was still alive. Still fighting." "Did he survive?" Jonathan asked quietly. Milo shook his head. "No. But he tried. He tried so hard. And I learned what fighting looks like." He turned to look at Jonathan, and his eyes were filled with a wisdom no child should possess. "Your daughter is fighting just like Charlie did. But she's stronger. She's not giving up. The machine is just too loud. It's drowning out her voice." Dr. Stevens adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Carson, I must emphasize that what this boy is describing is not medical observation. It's intuition at best, dangerous assumption at worst. And yet her brain activity has tripled in the past hour," Jonathan said coldly. "Her heart rate has stabilized. Her fingers have moved 17 times. I counted. So maybe your machines don't know everything, doctor?" The doctor fell silent, his face tight. Jonathan turned back to Milo. "What else do you see?" Milo reached out and gently touched Emily's hand again. Immediately, her fingers twitched in response. "She knows I'm here. She remembers me from before. When I first touched her, she opened her eyes because she was confused. She didn't understand why a stranger's hand felt warm when everything else felt cold and distant." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because that's how I would feel," Milo said simply. "If I was trapped in the dark and someone touched me with kindness, I'd try to see who it was too." Jonathan's throat tightened. He looked at his daughter, this girl he'd raised, this fierce and stubborn child who'd never backed down from anything. If anyone could fight their way out of a coma, it would be Emily. But the risk. The terrible, crushing risk. "Mr. Carson," Dr. Stevens said carefully, "I've consulted with our neurologist and our pulmonologist. They both agree that if you want to test the boy's theory, we need to do it properly. We can reduce the ventilator settings gradually, see if she can handle some of the breathing work herself. If she shows consistent improvement over 72 hours, we can consider full removal." 72 hours, Jonathan repeated. 3 days. It's the safest approach. Milo shook his head. "She doesn't have 3 days." Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Jonathan's voice was sharp with fear. "I mean, she's getting tired." Milo's hand trembled slightly as he held Emily's. "She's been fighting for so long already. If you make her wait 3 more days while the machine keeps pushing her down, she might stop fighting. She might give up. That's not how medical science works, Dr. Stevens said firmly. Maybe not, Milo replied. But that's how people work. I've seen it. When someone is drowning and they can see the surface but can't reach it, eventually they just let go. They stop struggling. They accept it. Jonathan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need a minute. I need to think. He walked out of the room and into the hallway, his hands shaking. This was impossible. This was a choice no father should have to make. Trust the doctors and risk Emily giving up? Or trust a homeless boy and risk killing her himself? He leaned against the wall, his head in his hands. Tough decision, brother. Jonathan's head snapped up. David Carson was standing a few feet away, perfectly dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression one of practiced concern. David, what are you doing here? I heard Emily had some unusual brain activity. I wanted to see if there was any change. David's smile was gentle, but his eyes were calculating. I also heard you let some street child into her room. Is that wise? That child might be the only one who truly understands what's happening to her. David laughed softly, the sound like ice cracking. Come on, Jonathan. You're a businessman. You deal in facts and numbers. You're really going to trust a homeless boy over trained medical professionals? The boy has seen things the doctors haven't, Jonathan said defensively. The boy is traumatized and probably mentally ill, David countered smoothly. He's been living on the streets, Jonathan. He doesn't have the education or the stability to make rational observations. He's giving you false hope, and false hope is the cruelest thing you can give a desperate man. Jonathan felt anger rising in his chest. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? David stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know you're in pain. I know you want Emily to wake up more than anything in the world. But Jonathan, what if she doesn't? What if you turn off that ventilator and she dies within minutes? Could you live with yourself? Could you? Jonathan shot back, his eyes narrowing. You'd inherit everything if she died. The company. The estate. Everything we built. David's face hardened. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Jonathan pushed off the wall and faced his brother directly. You've been pushing me to pull the plug for months. You said it was about ending her suffering. But maybe it was about something else. You're paranoid. Am I? Jonathan's voice was deadly quiet. Then explain why, the moment Emily shows signs of waking up, you're here trying to convince me to ignore them. David's jaw clenched. For a moment, the mask of concern slipped, and something cold and dangerous flashed in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by practiced hurt. I'm trying to protect you from making a mistake that will haunt you forever. But if you want to believe I'm some kind of villain, go ahead. I won't stop you. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. Jonathan watched him go, his mind racing. He'd known his brother his whole life. They'd built an empire together. But lately things had changed. David had become distant, secretive, always pushing for Jonathan to make decisions that would benefit the company over his daughter. Jonathan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped he'd never have to use. James? It's Jonathan Carson. I need you to investigate someone for me. My brother, David Carson. I need to know everything he's been doing for the past 6 months. Bank accounts, phone records, meetings, everything. And James? This is urgent. I think my daughter's life might depend on it. He hung up and returned to Emily's room. Milo was still there, still holding her hand, still watching her with that intense focus. Dr. Stevens was reviewing charts with the nurses, discussing options in medical terms Jonathan could barely follow. Jonathan sat down beside Milo again. Tell me honestly, if we do what you're suggesting, if we turn off the ventilator, what are the chances she survives? Milo didn't answer right away. He looked at Emily, really looked at her, studying the subtle signs only he seemed able to see. Finally he spoke. I don't know percentages. I'm not smart like that. But I know she wants to try. I know she's ready. And I know that if you don't let her try soon, she won't be strong enough to fight anymore. That's not good enough, Jonathan said, his voice breaking. I need certainty. I need guarantees. There are no guarantees, Milo said softly. Not in life. Not in death. Not in anything. You just have to choose what you believe in and hope you're right. Jonathan looked at this boy, this child who had nothing, who had survived things that would break most adults, who sat here holding the hand of a girl he'd only just met with more tenderness than most people showed in a lifetime. Why do you care? Jonathan asked suddenly. Why do you care so much about a stranger? Milo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because nobody cared about me. When I was freezing on the streets, when I was hungry, when I was scared, people walked past me like I was invisible. But your daughter, when I touched her hand, she grabbed back. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care that I was dirty or homeless or nobody. She just knew someone was there and she reached for them. That's the kind of person worth saving. Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest. Tears burned his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. Not yet. Dr. Stevens, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. I want to run a test. Not 3 days from now. Not tomorrow. Right now. The doctor's face went pale. Mr. Carson. A short test. 60 seconds. We turn off the ventilator for 60 seconds and see if she can breathe on her own. She can't, we turn it right back on. But we need to know. I need to know. This is highly dangerous and against medical protocol. I don't care about protocol. Jonathan's voice rose. That's my daughter lying in that bed. That's my only child. And I will not let her stay trapped because of paperwork and procedures. The room fell silent. Dr. Stevens removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked old, suddenly tired and defeated. If I agree to this, if something goes wrong, the liability? I'll sign anything you want, Jonathan interrupted. I take full responsibility. You're just following my orders. Now please help me. The doctor looked at Emily, then at Milo, then at Jonathan. He saw the desperation, the fear, the fierce love of a father who would burn the world down to save his child. 60 seconds, he said finally. Not 1 second more. And if there's any sign of distress, we restart immediately. Jonathan nodded, not trusting his voice. The nurses rushed to prepare. They brought crash carts, emergency medications, monitoring equipment. Everything needed to restart her heart if it stopped. Milo squeezed Emily's hand. You can do this, he whispered. I know you can. Just breathe. Like you've been trying to. Just breathe. Dr. Stevens positioned himself at the ventilator controls. On my count. 3, 2, 1. He switched off the machine. The room went completely silent. The rhythmic hiss of the ventilator, the sound that had filled this room for 6 months, was gone. Emily's chest stopped moving. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. 15. Nothing. Jonathan gripped the bed rail so hard his knuckles turned white. His entire body was rigid with terror. 20 seconds. 25. Her oxygen levels are dropping, a nurse said, her voice tight. 30 seconds. Restart the ventilator. Dr. Stevens ordered. Wait. Milo shouted. He leaned close to Emily's face, his hand still holding hers. Come on, Emily. I know you're strong. I know you can do this. Breathe. Please breathe. 40 seconds. We have to restart now, the doctor insisted. She's trying. Milo cried. Look at her chest. She's trying. And she was. The smallest flutter of movement. Her chest trying to expand, trying to pull air in, but it was so weak, so fragile. 45 seconds. Jonathan couldn't breathe. His vision blurred with tears. This was it. He'd killed her. He'd listened to a homeless child and killed his own daughter. 50 seconds. Mr. Carson, we're out of time. And then, on the 52nd second, Emily Carson's chest suddenly expanded. Air rushed into her lungs. Not from a machine. From her own effort. She took a breath. Small. Shaky. Weak. But it was hers. Oh my God, one of the nurses whispered. Emily breathed again. Then again. Each breath a little stronger than the last. Her oxygen levels started climbing. Slowly but climbing. Dr. Stevens stared at the monitors in complete shock. This is impossible? Milo was crying now, tears streaming down his face. You did it? You're breathing. You're really breathing. Jonathan collapsed to his knees beside the bed, his hands covering his face as sobs tore from his chest. 10 years since he'd cried. 10 years of being strong, being controlled, being the powerful CEO who never broke. But his daughter was breathing. On her own. After 6 months of being trapped, she was fighting her way back. Keep monitoring her, Dr. Stevens ordered the nurses, his voice shaking. Every vital sign. I want constant updates. Jonathan looked up at Milo through his tears. You saved her. You saved my daughter. Milo shook his head. She saved herself. I just told her it was okay to try. They sat there watching Emily breathe on her own for the first time in half a year. Each breath was a miracle. Each rise and fall of her chest was proof that life could fight back against darkness. But outside the room, David Carson stood watching through the glass window, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "She's breathing on her own. The ventilator is off." A voice crackled through the phone. "Do you want us to proceed with the alternative?" David watched his brother crying with joy, watched the homeless boy holding Emily's hand, watched his entire plan falling apart. "Yes," he said coldly. "The boy has become a problem. Make him disappear. And make it look like an accident." He ended the call and walked away, his face a mask of ice. Behind him, in Emily's room, Milo suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He looked toward the window but saw nothing except his own reflection. A small, dirty boy who'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than he could possibly understand. "Mr. Carson," he said quietly, "I think we need to be very careful now." Jonathan looked at him, still overwhelmed with emotion. "What do you mean?" "Someone didn't want your daughter to wake up. And now that she is, they're not going to be happy about it." Jonathan's joy faded instantly, replaced by cold calculation. He stood up, his CEO mask sliding back into place. "You're right. Dr. Stevens, I want security doubled on this room. No one gets in except authorized medical staff. And I mean no one." "Of course, Mr. Carson." Jonathan turned to Milo. "You stay here. You don't leave her side. I need to make some arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Milo asked nervously. Jonathan's eyes were hard as stone. "The kind that make sure whoever tried to keep my daughter asleep never gets the chance to try again." He walked out, pulling his phone from his pocket, already making calls that would set wheels in motion. Milo turned back to Emily, who was still breathing on her own, each breath a quiet Davide. "You're going to be okay," he whispered to her. "I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of a promise he might not be able to keep. Because somewhere in the city men were already moving. Men with orders to eliminate a problem. A problem named Milo. 3 hours later the hospital felt different. Security guards stood at every entrance to the ICU. Cameras that had been dormant for years were suddenly activated. Visitors were turned away. Even doctors had to show identification twice before being allowed near Emily's room. Jonathan Carson had turned his daughter's hospital room into a fortress. Inside that fortress, Emily continued to breathe. Sometimes her breaths were strong and steady. Other times they became shallow and weak, and the nurses would move closer, ready to restart the ventilator at a moment's notice. But she never stopped. She kept fighting. Milo hadn't moved from his chair. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but every time he started to drift off, he forced himself awake. He'd made a promise. He couldn't break it. A nurse brought him food, a sandwich and orange juice. Milo stared at it like it was treasure. When was the last time someone had given him food without him having to beg or steal for it? "Eat," the nurse said gently. She was an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. Her name tag read Margaret. "You can't help her if you collapse from hunger." Milo ate slowly, savoring every bite. The sandwich was turkey and cheese, simple but delicious. He'd forgotten what real food tasted like. Margaret watched him with a sad smile. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" Milo swallowed. "I don't remember." She shook her head and patted his shoulder. "You're a good boy. Not many people would care about a stranger the way you care about Emily." "She's not a stranger anymore," Milo said quietly. "Not really." Margaret checked Emily's vitals, writing numbers on a chart. "Her oxygen levels are holding steady at 92%. That's incredible. The doctors can't believe it." "Will she wake up soon?" Milo asked. "I don't know, sweetie. Her body is working hard just to breathe right now. Waking up fully, that might take time. Or it might happen suddenly. Comas are mysterious things." As if responding to their conversation, Emily's fingers twitched. Both Milo and Margaret looked down. Emily's hand moved slightly as if searching for something. Milo took her hand in his. Immediately, her fingers curled around his, holding on with surprising strength. Margaret's eyes widened. "Did you see that? That was deliberate. That was purposeful movement." She rushed to call Dr. Stevens. Within minutes, the room was filled with medical staff, all watching in amazement as Emily's hand gripped Milo's. They ran tests, shined lights in her eyes, checked her reflexes. Every test showed the same thing. Emily Carson was slowly, impossibly waking up. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Stevens said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been a neurologist for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone recover this quickly from this type of coma." "Maybe she was never as far gone as you thought," Milo said boldly. The doctor looked at him with new respect. Maybe you're right. Maybe we were so focused on the machines that we forgot to look at the patient. Jonathan returned to the room, his face grim. He'd changed out of his expensive suit and into jeans and a simple shirt. The first time Milo had seen him look almost normal. But his eyes were still hard, still calculating. "Doctor, I need a moment alone with the boy." Dr. Stevens nodded and ushered everyone out. The door closed, leaving Jonathan and Milo alone with Emily. Jonathan pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. "I had my people look into something," he said quietly. "The accident that put Emily in the coma. 6 months ago." Milo listened, his hand still holding Emily's. "The police report said it was a rainy night. My wife was driving. She lost control on a curve and hit a tree. My wife died on impact. Emily survived but suffered severe head trauma." Jonathan's voice was flat, emotionless, as if he was reading from a script. "That's what everyone believed. That's what I believed. But it's not true?" Milo asked. "I don't know anymore." Jonathan rubbed his face. "I had someone examine the car wreckage again. There were marks on the brake lines. Cut marks. Someone tampered with the car." Milo's blood went cold. Someone tried to kill them? Or tried to kill Emily specifically? Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. "My wife's death might have been collateral damage. Who would want to hurt Emily? She's just a kid." "She's not just a kid. She's the sole heir to the Carson fortune. Billions of dollars. Control of multiple companies. Real estate across 3 states. Jonathan looked at his daughter with anguish in his eyes. "I thought keeping her safe meant giving her everything. I never realized that everything I gave her made her a target." Milo understood suddenly. "Your brother." Jonathan nodded slowly. "David is my business partner. If Emily died, he would become the primary heir to everything. He's been pushing me for months to pull the plug, saying it was cruel to keep her alive artificially. I thought he was being compassionate. But now you think he cut the brakes," Milo finished. "I don't have proof yet. But my investigator is digging. If David did this, if he killed my wife and tried to kill my daughter." Jonathan's voice dropped to a whisper that was more frightening than any shout. "I will destroy him." The room was silent except for Emily's breathing. Then Milo asked the question that had been bothering him. "Mr. Carson, what happens to me when Emily wakes up?" Jonathan looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" I'm nobody. I'm homeless. I don't have papers or a family or anything. When this is all over, I'll just go back to the streets." Milo's voice was small. "That's how it always works for people like me." Jonathan stared at this boy, this child who'd saved his daughter, who sat here holding her hand with more loyalty than most adults showed in a lifetime, who expected nothing in return because he'd never been taught to expect anything. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "That's not how this works. Not this time." "What do you mean?" "I mean you're not going back to the streets. Ever." Jonathan leaned forward, his voice intense. "You saved Emily's life. You saw what trained doctors couldn't see. You had the courage to speak up when everyone else would have stayed silent. That kind of person doesn't belong on the streets." Milo's eyes filled with tears. "You're just saying that because you feel bad for me. I'm saying it because I mean it." Jonathan reached out and placed his hand on Milo's shoulder. "When this is over, when Emily wakes up fully, you're coming home with us. I'll make it legal. I'll make it official. You'll have a home, an education, a future. That's a promise." "But why?" Milo whispered. "Why would you do that for someone like me?" "Because Emily would want me to." Jonathan smiled for the first time, a real, genuine smile. "My daughter has always had a soft spot for strays and underdogs. She'd be furious if she woke up and found out I let you go back to living on the streets." Milo couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. Jonathan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression darkened. "My investigator found something. I need to go handle this. Will you stay with her?" "I'm not going anywhere," Milo promised. Jonathan stood and walked to the door, then paused. "Milo? Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to speak the truth when no one else would." He left and Milo was alone with Emily again. He looked down at her face. She was so pale, so fragile looking. But he could see the strength in her. It was in the way she kept breathing, kept fighting, kept trying to come back. "Your dad is nice," Milo whispered to her. "He's scary but nice. And he really loves you. You're lucky." Emily's fingers squeezed his hand slightly. "I promise I'll keep you safe," Milo continued. "I don't know how and I don't know from what, but I promise." Nobody is going to hurt you while I'm here. Outside the hospital in the parking lot, 3 men sat in a black van. They were dressed in maintenance uniforms, complete with fake ID badges. They'd been watching the hospital for 2 hours, studying the security patterns, counting the guards, noting the cameras. One of them spoke into a phone. The security is tight but not impossible. We can get to the boy if we're careful. David Carson's voice came through the speaker. I don't care about careful. I care about results. That boy is the only one who understands what's really happening with Emily. If he stays alive, he'll figure out what I did. He'll tell Jonathan. And then everything falls apart. What about the girl? Emily is no longer a threat. Even if she wakes up, her memories of the accident are gone. Brain trauma does that. But the boy is observant. Too observant. He needs to be eliminated. When? Tonight. During the shift change at midnight. That's when security is thinnest. Make it look like he wandered off and got hit by a car. A tragic accident. No one will question it. The line went dead. The 3 men checked their weapons. They weren't here to kill a child with guns. Too loud. Too obvious. They had something quieter. A needle filled with a drug that would stop a heart within seconds. One quick injection while the boy slept, then carry him out in a laundry cart. Dump him in the street. Run him over. Done. Just another dead homeless kid. The city had dozens of them. Inside the hospital, Milo felt his eyes growing heavy. It had been such a long day. So much fear, so much emotion, so much hope. His body was exhausted. Margaret the nurse came in again. Sweetie, you need to sleep. There's a cot in the next room. You can rest there. I can't leave her, Milo said, fighting to keep his eyes open. You're not leaving her. You'll be right next door. And I'll be here watching her all night. I promise I won't let anything happen. Milo looked at Emily, torn. He was so tired. His whole body ached. But he'd made a promise. Go, Margaret said gently. You can't help her if you collapse. Get some sleep. I'll wake you if anything changes. Finally, Milo nodded. He stood up slowly, his legs stiff from sitting so long. He walked to the door, then looked back one more time. Emily was still breathing. Still fighting. I'll be right next door, he told her. I'll come back soon. He followed Margaret to a small room with a cot and a thin blanket. It wasn't much, but to Milo it looked like luxury. A real bed. Indoors. Safe. He lay down and pulled the blanket up to his chin. Within seconds, exhaustion pulled him under. He dreamed of Emily. In his dream, she was awake and smiling, running through a beautiful house filled with sunlight. She turned and called to him, Come on, Milo. You're home now. You're finally home. But then the dream shifted. Shadows crept across the walls. Emily's smile faded. She reached out to him, her eyes wide with fear. Milo, wake up. They're coming. Wake up. Milo jerked awake in the darkness. His heart was pounding. The room was pitch black. What time was it? How long had he been asleep? He sat up slowly, listening. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple pairs. Moving quietly. Too quietly. These weren't the normal sounds of a hospital at night. Milo's instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive on the streets, screamed danger. He crept to the door and peered through the small window. 3 men in maintenance uniforms were walking down the hallway toward Emily's room. But something was wrong. Their movements were too careful, too practiced. And one of them was holding something that glinted in the dim light. A syringe. Milo's blood turned to ice. They were going to hurt Emily. Or hurt him. Or both. He had to warn someone. He had to get help. But if he made noise, they'd hear him. They'd catch him. Milo looked around the small room desperately. There was a window, but it was locked. A phone on the wall, but calling for help would make noise. The footsteps were getting closer. He made a decision. Milo grabbed the blanket from the cot and stuffed it under the covers, making it look like someone was still sleeping there. Then he squeezed himself into the tiny space between a filing cabinet and the wall, making himself as small as possible. The door opened. 2 of the men came in, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. There he is, one whispered, pointing at the lump under the blanket. They moved toward the cot. One of them pulled out the syringe, flicking it with his finger to remove air bubbles. He reached for the blanket. And Milo screamed at the top of his lungs. Help! Help! They're trying to kill me. The men spun around, shocked. They saw Milo squeezed in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. Alarms started blaring. Lights flickered on. Running footsteps thundered down the hallway. The men cursed and ran, abandoning their plan, disappearing into the chaos of the suddenly active hospital. Security guards burst into the room, their radios crackling. Margaret ran in behind them, her face pale with fear. Milo? What happened? Milo was shaking violently. Men, 3 men, they had a needle, they were going to. He couldn't finish the sentence. He just pointed at the syringe that one of the men had dropped in their panic. It lay on the floor, the liquid inside glowing faintly in the harsh hospital lights. Margaret picked it up carefully with a tissue. Oh my God. A security guard spoke urgently into his radio. We have an attempted assault on the minor in room 412. 3 suspects fled south through the emergency stairs. Alert all units. But Milo wasn't thinking about the men who tried to hurt him. He was thinking about Emily. Where's Emily? He shouted. Is she okay? Did they hurt her? He pushed past the adults and ran to her room. The door was locked from the inside. Margaret had locked it before leaving to check on him. Emily was safe. She was still breathing. Still fighting. But when Milo looked at her face, he saw something that made his heart stop. A single tear was rolling down her cheek. She'd heard him scream. Somehow, deep in her coma, she'd heard him in danger and she'd cried. I'm okay, Milo whispered, taking her hand. I'm okay. They didn't get me. We're both safe. Her fingers squeezed his hand. Not a reflex this time. A response. Jonathan Carson arrived 15 minutes later, fury radiating from him like heat. What the hell happened? The head of security explained quickly, his voice shaking. 3 men posed as maintenance workers. They got past the front desk using fake IDs. They went for the boy. We're reviewing all security footage now. Find them, Jonathan growled. I don't care what it takes. Find them and bring them to me. He turned to Milo and his expression softened. Are you hurt? Milo shook his head. I hid. They didn't touch me. You were smart. And brave. Jonathan knelt down to Milo's level. But this proves what I suspected. Someone wants you dead. Someone very powerful. And we both know who. Your brother? Milo whispered. My brother, Jonathan confirmed, his voice like ice. He pulled out his phone and made a call. James? It's time. Whatever evidence you found on David, I need it now. And I need it airtight. He just tried to murder a child. He's not getting away with this. He hung up and looked at Milo. You're not sleeping alone anymore. From now on you stay in this room with Emily. Armed security outside the door. No one gets in or out without my explicit permission. What about you? Milo asked. I'm going to visit my brother. Jonathan's smile was terrifying. And we're going to have a very important conversation about attempted murder. He left, his footsteps echoing like gunshots down the hallway. Milo sat down beside Emily, his whole body still shaking from the adrenaline and fear. Your uncle is a bad person, he whispered to her. He tried to hurt you. He tried to hurt me. But your dad is going to stop him. Your dad is really scary when he's angry. Emily's eyelids fluttered. Not much. Just a tiny movement. But it was there. Are you trying to wake up? Milo asked hopefully. Are you trying to come back? Her breathing changed slightly, becoming a bit faster. She was responding. She was aware. Fight harder, Milo urged. Your dad needs you. I need you. We need you to wake up and tell everyone what really happened. Can you remember the accident? Can you remember who hurt you? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so quietly that Milo almost missed it, Emily made a sound. Not a word. Just a small noise in the back of her throat. But it was the first sound she'd made in 6 months. Margaret, who had been standing guard by the door, rushed over. Did she just vocalize? She did, Milo said, tears of joy streaming down his face. She's really waking up. Margaret checked all the monitors, her hands moving quickly. Her brain activity is spiking again. Higher than before. Milo, keep talking to her. Your voice is triggering something. Milo leaned close to Emily's ear. I know you're scared. I know you're tired. But you have to keep fighting. You have to come back. There are people who love you waiting. Your dad loves you so much. And I. His voice cracked. I've only known you for a few hours, but I already care about you. You grabbed my hand when no one else ever did. You made me feel like I mattered. So please, Emily. Please wake up. Emily's eyes moved under her closed lids, like she was dreaming. Or remembering. And in her mind, trapped in the fog and darkness, Emily heard Milo's voice like a light cutting through the shadows. She remembered the boy with the warm hand. She remembered deciding to grab it. She remembered choosing to fight. And now she remembered something else. The night of the accident. Her mother driving. Rain pouring down. Music playing on the radio. And then, a face she knew. Her Uncle David. He'd been at their house earlier that night. She'd seen him in the garage. Seen him doing something to the car. She thought he was just checking the oil or something. But now, trapped in her coma, her mind clearing bit by bit, Emily understood. He'd cut the brakes. Her uncle had murdered her mother. Her uncle had tried to murder her. And now, from what she could hear through the fog, he was trying again. Trying to kill the boy who was saving her life. No. Emily pushed against the darkness with everything she had. She'd been hiding in here for too long. She'd been too scared to wake up, too afraid of the pain that waited. But not anymore. She had to wake up. She had to tell them what she knew. She had to save Milo. Her fingers moved again, gripping his hand with all the strength she could muster. "She's getting stronger," Margaret said in amazement. "Her vitals are improving by the minute." "Come on, Emily," Milo urged. "You can do it. I know you can." Emily tried to open her eyes. It felt like lifting mountains. But she pushed. And pushed. And slowly, impossibly slowly, her eyelids began to open. Emily's eyes opened. Not all the way. Just barely. Thin slits of green struggling against 6 months of darkness. But they were open. Milo gasped. "Emily? Emily, can you see me?" Her eyes tried to focus. Everything was blurry like looking through water. Shapes and colors swirled together. But there was one shape she recognized. A small boy. Dirty face. Kind eyes. The boy who'd saved her. She tried to speak, but her throat was so dry it felt like sandpaper. No words came out. Just a weak, rasping sound. "Don't try to talk yet," Margaret said quickly, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake. You're really awake." She pressed the call button frantically. "Dr. Stevens. Everyone. She's awake." Within seconds, the room exploded with activity. Doctors and nurses rushed in, checking monitors, shining lights in Emily's eyes, asking her questions she couldn't answer yet. But through it all, Emily kept her eyes locked on Milo. And she held his hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. "Emily, can you squeeze my hand?" Dr. Stevens asked. She squeezed. Weakly but deliberately. "Can you follow this light with your eyes?" She tried. Her eyes moved slowly, tracking the small flashlight. "This is remarkable," Dr. Stevens breathed. "Her neurological responses are functioning. Emily, do you know where you are?" She blinked once. "Yes." "Do you know who this is?" He pointed at Milo. Another blink. "Yes." "Can you remember what happened to you?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. She blinked twice. No. Then once. Yes. She remembered some things. But not everything. The memories were fragments, pieces of a shattered mirror. "It's okay," Milo said softly. "You don't have to remember everything right now. You're safe. That's all that matters." But Emily's grip on his hand tightened with sudden urgency. Her eyes went wide with fear. She tried to speak again, forcing sound through her damaged vocal cords. "Danger." The word was barely a whisper, but everyone heard it. "Danger?" Dr. Stevens repeated. "Emily, are you in pain?" She blinked twice. No. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to Milo. She was trying to tell them something. Something important. "Me? Lo." She rasped. "Danger." Milo understood immediately. "You're worried about me? About the men who tried to hurt me?" She blinked once. "Yes." But there was more. She was trying to say more. "Isful." The word came out broken, painful. "Vid." The room went completely silent. Dr. Stevens looked confused. "Your uncle? What about your uncle?" But Milo understood. His face went pale. "She knows. She remembers. Your uncle did this to you, didn't he?" Emily's tears fell harder. She blinked once. "Yes." "He cut the brakes," Milo continued, his voice shaking. "He killed your mother. He tried to kill you." "Yes." A nurse gasped. Dr. Stevens pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Mr. Carson. He needs to hear this." But Emily's eyes suddenly went wide with terror. She shook her head frantically, trying to form words. "No. Call. He's there." "Your father is with your uncle right now?" Milo asked. "Yes." "And you think your uncle will hurt him?" Emily's whole body tensed with fear. She tried to sit up, tried to move, but she was too weak. 6 months of lying motionless had wasted her muscles. "Trap," she whispered desperately. "It's trap." Milo's blood turned to ice. "Mr. Carson is walking into a trap." He looked at Dr. Stevens. "You have to call him. You have to warn him right now." The doctor was already dialing, his hands shaking. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. He's not picking up, Dr. Stevens said, his voice tight with worry. Emily made a sound like a sob. Her father was in danger and she was too weak to help him. Milo made a decision in that moment. A decision that was probably stupid, definitely dangerous, but absolutely necessary. Where does David Carson live? He asked. You can't be serious, Margaret said. You're a child. You can't. Where? Milo shouted. Dr. Stevens hesitated, then gave him an address. But Milo, you need to let the police handle this. Milo was already running. He burst out of the room and down the hallway, his bare feet slapping against the cold floor. Security guards shouted at him to stop, but he was small and fast. He dodged between people, slipped through doors and made it to the hospital exit before anyone could catch him. The night air hit him like a slap. It was freezing and he had no coat, no shoes, nothing but the thin hospital clothes on his back. But he didn't stop. He ran down the street, his breath coming in gasps, his feet burning against the cold pavement. He had no money for a taxi. No phone to call for help. Nothing but his own determination, and the address burned into his memory. David Carson's house was in the wealthy district, miles away. Milo ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. Behind him, back at the hospital, Emily struggled against her weak body. She tried to get up, tried to move, but she couldn't. She was trapped again, just like in the coma. But then she felt something. A warmth in her chest. A strength she didn't know she had. The same strength that had kept her breathing. The same strength that had brought her back from the darkness. She pushed. Her leg moved. Just an inch. But it moved. Emily, don't, Margaret said gently. You're too weak. You need to rest. But Emily didn't rest. She pushed again. Her leg moved more. Then her other leg. She was sitting up now, her body screaming with pain and effort. Someone stop her. Dr. Stevens called out. But nobody could. Because Emily Carson had been trapped for 6 months, and she was done being helpless. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Nurses rushed forward to catch her, but she pushed them away with surprising strength. Her feet touched the floor. For the first time in half a year she was standing. Her legs shook violently. They could barely hold her weight. But she held on to the bed rail and took one step. Then another. This is medically impossible, Dr. Stevens whispered. But Emily didn't care about medical possibility. She cared about her father. And about the boy who'd saved her life. She took another step. And another. Each one was agony, but she kept moving. Where are you going? Margaret asked, even though she already knew. Emily looked at her with fierce determination and managed one word. Dad. Meanwhile, across the city, Jonathan Carson stood in his brother's living room. The house was massive, filled with expensive furniture and artwork. But it felt cold. Empty. David sat in a leather chair, sipping whiskey, perfectly calm. You wanted to talk? David said smoothly. So talk. Jonathan stood with his hands clenched at his sides. I know what you did. Do you now? David's smile didn't reach his eyes. And what exactly did I do? You cut the brake lines on my wife's car. You killed her. You tried to kill Emily. And when that didn't work, when she survived but fell into a coma, you tried to keep her there. You paid someone to tamper with her ventilator settings, didn't you? That's why she never improved. You were keeping her in a permanent vegetative state. David took another sip of whiskey. That's quite a story. Do you have proof? I have bank records showing payments to a hospital maintenance worker who suddenly disappeared. I have testimony from a nurse who saw someone tampering with Emily's equipment. And I have Emily herself who just woke up and told us everything. David's smile finally faded. Emily woke up? An hour ago. And she remembers you, David. She remembers seeing you in the garage that night. She remembers everything. For a long moment, David said nothing. Then he set down his glass very carefully and stood up. Then I suppose we have a problem, he said quietly. Jonathan saw the look in his brother's eyes and realized his mistake. He'd come here alone. He'd walked right into David's trap. David pulled a gun from behind his back. I'm sorry, brother. I truly am. But you've left me no choice. You won't get away with this, Jonathan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Everyone knows I came here. If I die, they'll know it was you. No, they'll think you committed suicide. The grief of possibly losing Emily, the stress of running the company, it all became too much. You came here to say goodbye to your brother and then you went home and shot yourself. Very tragic. Very believable. Emily will tell them the truth. Emily is weak and confused. Who will believe the ramblings of a girl just coming out of a coma? Memory distortion is extremely common in her condition. Her testimony will be useless. David's finger moved to the trigger. Goodbye, Jonathan. I wish you'd just stayed out of it. The gun fired. But Jonathan didn't fall. Because at that exact moment, a small body crashed through the window in an explosion of glass. Milo hit the floor hard, rolling, gasping for breath. His entire body was scraped and bleeding from climbing up the side of the house and smashing through the window. The gunshot had missed Jonathan by inches. David spun around, shocked. You. He aimed the gun at Milo, his face twisted with rage. You stupid, interfering little rat. Jonathan lunged forward, tackling his brother. The gun fired again, the bullet slamming into the ceiling. The two men crashed into furniture, fighting desperately. Milo scrambled to his feet, looking for something, anything to help. He grabbed a heavy lamp and swung it at David's head. It connected with a sickening crack. David stumbled, dazed. Jonathan ripped the gun from his hand and pointed it at his brother. It's over, Jonathan panted. David laughed, blood trickling from his temple. It's never over. You think you've won? I have lawyers, money, connections. I'll be out in months. And I'll come for Emily again. I'll come for your little street rat. Oh. He never finished the sentence. Because the front door exploded open and police officers swarmed in, guns drawn. Freeze. Hands up. Behind them, leaning heavily on a cane and supported by Dr. Stevens and Margaret, was Emily Carson. She'd walked out of the hospital. She'd gotten into an ambulance. She'd made them bring her here. And she'd called the police on the way. Her legs were shaking. Her body was screaming in pain. But she stood there, staring at her uncle with eyes full of fury and heartbreak. You killed Mom, she whispered. David's face went pale. All his calm, all his control shattered in that moment. He looked at his niece, this girl he'd tried to murder, standing there against all odds, and he knew he'd lost. Emily, he started to say. No. Her voice was stronger now, filled with rage and grief. You don't get to say my name. You don't get to look at me. You killed her. You killed my mother. She collapsed, her strength finally giving out. Dr. Stevens caught her, but she kept her eyes locked on David as the police dragged him away in handcuffs. I survived, she said, tears streaming down her face. I came back. And you're going to pay for what you did. David said nothing as they let him out. He was already thinking of lawyers, of bail, of escape plans. But he would never escape what he'd done. The truth was out now. And the truth doesn't forget. Jonathan rushed to Emily, falling to his knees beside her. Baby, you shouldn't be here. You need to be in the hospital. I needed to see it, Emily said weakly. I needed to see him lose. She looked past her father at Milo, who stood covered in cuts and blood, his bare feet leaving prints on the expensive carpet. Saved, Dad, she whispered. Milo walked over slowly. You saved me first. When you grabbed my hand. When you told me you were still in there. You saved me. Emily reached out and Milo took her hand. The CEO's daughter and the homeless boy. Two people who should never have met. But somehow, impossibly, they'd saved each other's lives. Few months later, the house was filled with sunlight. Emily stood in the doorway of the bedroom that used to be a guest room. Now it was Milo's room. The walls were painted blue, his favorite color. There were books on the shelves, clothes in the closet, a comfortable bed with soft blankets. Everything a child should have. Still feels weird, doesn't it? Emily said, smiling. Milo looked up from the book he was reading. His hair was clean now, cut neatly. His face had filled out from months of regular meals. He wore jeans and a t-shirt that actually fit him. He looked like a normal 12-year-old boy, but his eyes were still old, still careful, still watching. Sometimes I wake up and think I'm dreaming, he admitted. Like I'm going to open my eyes and be back on the streets. You're not, Emily said firmly. She walked into the room, walking easily now, her body fully recovered from the coma. You're home. This is real. She sat on his bed and he closed his book. They'd had this conversation before many times. Emily knew it would take years for Milo to truly believe he was safe. Physical therapy today? She asked. Yeah. And then I have that math test. Milo made a face. School is harder than I thought it would be. You're doing great. Your tutor says you're catching up fast. Not as fast as you recovered. You were walking after like 3 days. Stubbornness runs in the Carson family, Emily said with a grin. Then her expression grew serious. Have you been having the nightmares again? Milo looked down. Sometimes. Not as much. The nightmares were always the same. David Carson escaping prison. Coming back for them. Finishing what he'd started. But David wasn't escaping. He'd been sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Multiple charges. Murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. The evidence had been overwhelming. He would die in prison. But Milo's mind still worried. Still prepared for danger. That's what the streets had taught him. Dad wants to know if you're ready, Emily said, changing the subject. Ready for what? The surprise. Milo's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What surprise? Emily just smiled. Come on. She led him downstairs where Jonathan was waiting in the living room. He wore jeans and a casual shirt. He'd been dressing less formally since everything happened, spending more time at home, less time at the office. There he is, Jonathan said warmly. Milo, I have something for you. He handed Milo an envelope. Milo opened it carefully. Inside were official-looking documents with legal seals and signatures. He couldn't understand most of the words. His reading was still improving. What is this? He asked. Jonathan knelt down so he was eye level with Milo. It's your adoption papers. Official and legal. As of today, you're not just staying with us temporarily. You're my son. You're Emily's brother. You're a Carson. Milo's hands started shaking. I'm your son? If you want to be, Jonathan said gently. No pressure. No obligation. But I would be honored to be your father. Officially. Milo couldn't speak. Tears blurred his vision. He'd spent his entire life being nobody. No family. No name anyone cared about. Just a dirty kid on the streets that people stepped over. And now he had a father. A sister. A home. I want to be, he whispered. I want to be your son. Jonathan pulled him into a hug, and Milo buried his face in his father's shoulder and cried. Not sad tears. Not scared tears. Happy tears. For the first time in his life he was crying because he was happy. Emily joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of them. Welcome to the family, little brother. I'm not little, Milo said through his tears. I'm only 2 months younger than you. Still counts, Emily teased. They stayed like that for a long time. A broken family that had found wholeness in the most unexpected way. That night, after dinner, after homework, after all the normal routines of their new life, Milo stood at his bedroom window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, other kids were sleeping on the streets. Cold, hungry, invisible. He'd been one of them just months ago. I won't forget, he whispered to the night. I won't forget what it's like. And someday I'm going to help them. All of them. Behind him, Emily appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? Just thinking. She walked over and stood beside him. About how one decision changed everything. If I hadn't gone into that hospital. If I hadn't seen you. If I hadn't been brave enough to speak up, everything would be different. You'd still be on the streets, Emily said quietly. And you'd still be in a coma. They were silent for a moment, both thinking about the impossible chain of events that had brought them here. Do you ever wonder why? Emily asked. Why you found me? Out of all the rooms in that hospital, why did you walk into mine? Milo reached into his pocket and pulled out something he'd been carrying since that first night. Emily's hospital bracelet. It had fallen off during all the chaos and Milo had kept it. But now, in the dim light from the window, he noticed something he'd never seen before. The bracelet was glowing. Just barely. A faint, pale blue light that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Emily, he said slowly. Are you seeing this? She leaned closer, her eyes widening. What is that? The glow grew brighter. And for just a moment, less than a second, they both saw something impossible. A figure standing in the room with them. Translucent. Shimmering. A woman with Emily's eyes and a gentle smile. Mom? Emily whispered. The figure reached out and touched both their heads gently, lovingly. Then she was gone. The bracelet's glow faded. The room was normal again. Emily and Milo stood frozen, staring at each other. Did we just? Emily couldn't finish. Your mom, Milo said, his voice shaking. She led me to you. That first night. I didn't find you by accident. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She saved us both. They looked back out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, other miracles were waiting to happen. Other impossible connections waiting to be made. Thank you, Emily whispered to the empty air. Thank you for bringing him to me. Thank you for not giving up on us. The window fogged slightly with their breath, and for just a moment, words appeared in the condensation as if written by an invisible finger. Love never gives up. Ever. Then the words faded and the night was still. Milo and Emily looked at each other and smiled. They'd been lost in darkness. They'd fought their way back to light. And now together they would make sure others found their way home too. Because that's what family does. They save each other. Over and over again. No matter what. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on the lessons learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in the next video.